So, one night I was taking a quick look through eBay and I ended up following a rather confusing listing, where I won a phone for 95p. This right here is, well, the phone I ordered off of eBay for around 95p, which is virtually $1 for you guys over in the States. And well, I ordered this with the knowledge that it was a phone, and it was also a Samsung, guessing from the blurry pictures. But then again, we didn't really have all much information to go off with what model it could be, and all we knew was it was meant to be the colour red. But this isn't, this is very clearly the colour yellow, with some unfortunately brown dirt mixed in. Yes, that is indeed dirt. But what exactly did 95p get us? Well, we got a phone, we got the battery, we got the back part of the phone, and we also got, as I've already said before, some dirt. It's honestly quite surprising. And best of all is the writing all over the back. We have everything from broken, to dead phone, to bad phone spelt wrong on the back of the phone, which would lead me to believe that the phone is indeed dead, probably why it was so cheap. Not that they actually mentioned that in the listing, they only said it was lightly used. This is definitely not lightly used. But once we get past the utterly horrible condition of the phone, what did they actually send us? So, our 95p phone. Well, it appears to be a Samsung Galaxy Mini 2. So if you've watched one of my previous videos, I hope you're ready, because we love this weird era of phones where Samsung managed to oversaturate every area of the market with phones that were all borderline the same thing in one way or another. Released in early 2012, this 7-year-old beast has a 3.2-inch TFT screen with viewing angles designed for people with no eyesight. It does, however, boast a decently capable Snapdragon S1 processor and Adreno 200 graphics. 512MB of RAM is on board, as well as a microSD card support in the form of a microSD card slot. 4GB of internal storage is there, along with 1GB actually being usable, because the rest is mostly to hold the operating system and the whole host of updates that have happened since 2012. Other than that, you've got the likes of a headphone jack and all that jazz. In other words, it just aimed to mimic the high-end smartphones of the era with every feature in existence, while cutting costs for things like screen and camera quality, as well as the form factor. Which, I would praise it for. But Samsung's whole lineup was dedicated to doing this back then. Virtually all these phones, from the Samsung Galaxy Y to the Galaxy Ace to the Galaxy Mini, all achieve the same thing. But then again, I can't hate on it, as it did cost me less than £1. So for those of you who didn't manage to see the carnage in the first section, this device is utterly filthy, so what we're going to be doing is giving it a proper spray down with some cleaning solution, getting all the contacts clear, getting the writing off, and then we're going to find out if this thing can actually get itself fired up and ready to go. At least, you can call it a mini restoration if you want, we just kind of want to see if we can use the phone. So with that all cleaned up, the next matter at hand is, does the phone actually work? And well, that's where things get interesting. See, I used a brand new micro USB cable costing more than the actual phone itself, and things were off to a good start as we got the phone showing up with the battery icon, and then we even managed to get the phone to boot to the operating system, which is the brilliant Android 2. So it seems strange that this phone had broken written all over it, considering that it seemed like it was working absolutely fine. And then the issues started. It started locking up, it started freezing, it started crashing, and don't even get me started on trying to change any options, that would crash the phone instantly. So the 95p, it turns out, sometimes and occasionally could try and start an app, but that's about it, and there is the 95p phone experience. But this is a budget builds video, and we aren't exactly going to stop here. No, this is where the fun begins. Well, fun at least for you guys. Trying to fix this thing genuinely took far too long, but here we go. So here are the issues. In hindsight, it's all actually pretty simple. You know how this thing ends up using a lot of its storage to keep Android on it? Well, that memory degrades, and ridiculously, it can end up killing not only the operating system, but also its own recovery. meaning the phone will just end up trying to do nothing. Occasionally you might even get a sort of RAM dump, occasionally you get the phone to boot. Apparently it was a miracle this thing booted in the first place when I spoke to people online. And of course this is a whole host of issues that are apparently quite common, and you can just find them when you Google it really. There's people with videos showing the same issue and they can't exactly fix it. But how did I solve this problem, I hear you ask? Well, most of you will be thinking, why not flash a recovery because that'll work? Well, no. It really doesn't, because you can't boot to it with the phone in this state. So here's what I had to do. So firstly, I had to put the phone back to its original firmware, the thing that actually Samsung would have put on here from the factory, then get the phone back into download mode, flash a really old 2012 custom recovery, where we could delete the system, format the entire phone, and then flash a new custom recovery, where we could from there create new partitions on the phone's already dying storage, and then flash a new operating system or ROM, however you want to call it, and then, well, it did work. See, you can't just flash a custom recovery and boot to it, because the phone won't understand that it's there, and it will just keep crashing by trying to boot to the OS instead of going to the custom recovery. It took me a while to figure it out, and apparently it's a really common issue. Either way, after hours of painstaking work, where I just wanted to throw the phone at a brick wall, it was now booting. So here we have it, the 95p phone up and running with a more modern Android 4.2, which is a custom version of the Cyanogen mod. There are plenty of other ROMs out there which are worth a shot, but at the end of the day, this is the one I ended up finding that worked best. I did try a few others, but I don't really touch on that in the video. But at least, it's the one that I think we can get away with the most usability on. So because I now seem to hate myself with how much effort I put into trying to get this phone working, I decided why not? Why don't I try and live with this phone? Which is exactly what I set off to do. Every task I needed to do, my first port of call was the phone. So real quickly, why don't we get into what happened? First of all, ridiculously, the same night that I'd ended up fixing the phone, I decided it was about time I popped outside and maybe got some food or, get some petrol. And it was about this time I thought, maybe I'll listen to some music, which I decided was something that most phones should be able to do okay. And actually this phone, credit to it, it was a bit slow getting around Spotify, which is what I decided to use, but so far I managed to browse for them songs, put them in a playlist, and then pair the phone to my car, and then play the songs. I will say, it didn't have any issues at all pairing to the car. It took a few seconds of dropping in and out before it would actually start playing clearly, but after that, it ran absolutely fine no matter how far I was driving. You can't skip songs, and the pause and play function definitely has some delay, but either way it was off to a good but slow start. However, once I'd done some driving, I felt like it might be time to, try and use maps or something like that and decide where else to go to. Just to actually see if the phone could do it. But the problem is, I needed to use Wi-Fi to do this, but the Wi-Fi strength on this phone is not a strong point. I mean, it's not bad, it's just that if you actually want to try and find some Wi-Fi sources when you're out and about, you can't use them, because you have to try and find directly where it's coming from. It just can't pick up these public signals very well. Other than that, on my day-to-day, I did try and use the camera, which worked okay from time to time, but even then, that's a bit of a stretch. You need to try and find the stock Samsung camera app, as it's a must for even attempting to use the camera, but we got a few decently nice shots off on it, but it's far from a point and shoot that can actually do anything. If it's moving, it's going to be a blurry image, so stick to rocks and scenery if you want to do anything like that camera-wise. App support, well, you've already seen me using a few different apps, but I didn't run into all too many issues other than the Play Store being so dreadfully slow. It didn't even pick up on the fact that I'd bought some apps with my account and was trying to get me to pay for them again, something that took a few restarts to fix. Other than that though, it downloads most apps with no issues, but some apps that are relatively large will just off themselves once they start to install, so the Oddworld games, they didn't work. Web browsing, you really do need to find a better browser, as I opted for Firefox, as the others tended to slow me down quite a lot. Oh, and there were the words, browsing the web. It can actually do it, especially on the go, and I know that sounds relatively surprising, but it is very slow, it's lethargic, big sites will clog up the RAM and bring the phone to a crawl. In fact, you can hardly use the menus or actual Android at that point, and the small screen is definitely a challenge by today's standards with that very low resolution and very poor viewing angles. In fact, that's why it's so hard for me to film this. Still, for most of your basic needs, provided you've got access to a Wi-Fi signal or 3G, as it does actually support 3G, then you can get away with a little bit of web browsing. The rest of the basics, from alarm functions to even FM radio, all seem to do relatively fine. They're not very intensive to do, and I didn't have any other issues with it. But there's that age-old question that people are going to be asking if I don't test it. Can it actually run a few games? Because you guys love it when I try and run games on things that really shouldn't do. I decided to start it off at the shallow end, something you very rarely hear from me when I'm testing things, with Hill Climb Racing, which is just a standard mobile game, and even then it did have a few hitches here or there, but ultimately it was a really solid experience on the go, and the worst area was loading times, which is fair enough considering the lacking RAM and failing storage. All in all though, as long as you don't mind a few hitches, it ran alright, and I didn't notice any major problems. Then we had the likes of PS1 emulation, and even with really intensive titles like Metal Gear Solid in a lowly 240p resolution, we actually had a decent experience. I know, it's really surprising. It definitely had its fair share of slowdown in places, but it was more than playable, which is exactly what counts when you're playing on a budget of less than £1. If you just want some one-off missions on the go with the VR mode or whatever it is, or the virtual training that it has, then I could definitely see this being an enjoyable way to go about it. Now this is an intensive test, especially for 95p. We have some full-on DS emulation, which ran pretty poor, but it did actually run. So there you have it, a modernish handheld running on a phone that costs less than the charging cable we're using. Genuinely impressive stuff, even if the phone struggles to function when this is going on. I'm not going to claim it was fully playable, but you could probably get away with a few simpler titles, maybe?
So of course, when you test titles like Minecraft, it's no surprise that the intensive ones really don't work. In fact, according to a lot of people, it's a miracle I even got the game launching. It did take around 10 minutes to get this far, but you get the idea. Titles like that, well, they're definitely not playable on a 95p phone. In fact, it really struggled to even load the PNGs of the logo, so that really about says it all.
You've got all your other areas which ran absolutely fine, older handhelds and consoles, which could see minor slowdown, which did work absolutely fine. In fact, the only other thing to test was the likes of YouTube, which did actually allow the modern app to be installed, but it was rather slow. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen the YouTube logo remain on screen for as long. Either way, media playback was actually doable on the phone, but you're probably better off going with a third-party solution, as the full YouTube app can tend to be a bit of a nightmare to use. But it did get it all done, and now the torment can be over. So, there we have it, the Samsung Galaxy Mini 2, or as I would rather call this video, I suffer with a 95p phone, which was as much fun to use as it was to fix. And let me tell you, it's a good thing that audio is edited in post, as yeah, it was not an enjoyable experience, but at least we figured out what goes wrong with them, and it was doable. So I will commend the little phone for what it actually did do. It managed to get through a few days in 2019 from media to entertainment, but it was slow. That's just the big takeaway from this. It's a rather solid little device for 95p, so I can't really complain, but I can say it was slow. And at least you fellas that watched this didn't have to figure out what was wrong with it. So, 95p phone, it worked. It's slow, it managed it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed watching this little spin-off video, as I always like to pick up a cheap phone from time to time and try and save it. Good night. So, another one for the cheap tech series that I keep ending up doing, which is always fun to work on, other than this phone which was a pain in the arse, but you can always like and subscribe for more like this, and I will catch you in the next one.